Marco Show. And, of course, Elvis Presley. You folks know, I've been transparent about that. I've always been an Elvis fan. I've been an Elvis fan for a long time. What do they say, right? That people are either Elvis people or Beatles people. I mean, I like the Beatles, but I always liked Elvis more. And Elvis Presley died, as you know, on August 16th, 1977. And it's been, 41 years since he died. And we've talked about Elvis from time to time on the show over the years when he was inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame to join the Rock Hall of Fame and the Country Hall of Fame. And you may recall we also had on the show with us Rick Stanley a while back, Elvis's stepbrother, who's now a Baptist pastor, who says that the day before Elvis died, Elvis was talking to him about Jesus Christ and telling him how he needs to accept Jesus Christ for salvation and such, and he ended up dying the next day. And so that's why I was pretty interested in a Broadway play, off-Broadway play, I believe it is, The King, The Final Hours. This is appearing at the Producers Club Theater in New York, October 17th through the 28th. And this takes a look at basically the last hours of Elvis Presley and some of the issues about his faith and such. And it is the playwright and the producer of The King, The Final Hours is Mark Macias. He's an Emmy Award-winning producer, former executive producer with NBC, senior producer with CBS in New York. And it's directed by Damone Seraphin, who is a Broadway performer, has been in Ragtime, Rent, Miss Saigon, many others. And they're both ministers, and they are the producers and director of this Broadway play, The King, The Final Hours. And they both join us now, Mark Macias and Damone Seraphin. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks,
Pleasure
Bob.
to be on.
Thank you. So first, tell us a little bit about how this even came about in the first place. I mean, The King, The Final Hours. Mark, you're the playwright, the producer of this. What's the genesis of this?
Yeah, thanks for having us on, first off. I thought I was the biggest Elvis fan in the world, but I might have met my match.
I might be giving you some competition. I'm an Elvis guy, so.
Oh, I've loved Elvis since for pretty much as long as I can remember. Growing up, my mom used to always play his gospel records. I might have just been a little boy who wasn't really listening, but I think I probably was listening.
Sure.
As those records were playing. Even in high school and junior high, when we had to write book reports in school, I was always writing reports on Elvis Presley. His music I played not only in church, but learned to play some of his other songs, his famous songs like Love Me Tender, on the piano. And, I was just always a big fan of his.
I think you got me beat. I think you passed me up because I haven't gone that. I'm not that in that deep end of the pool. But you know what? I'm a big Elvis fan. So I get it. So how'd this come about?
Watching a lot of those movies of his and even documentaries, they were always so glamorous. He's the king and had this great life and was a great artist, but no one ever explored those like the man had everything. I mean, fame, power, money, anything a man of this material world would want, he had, and yet he wasn't happy. He was looking for more. And even as a boy, I was always fascinated with that story. Why would he, die, whether he overdosed on accident or on purpose, or whether the drugs just over time took his heart? It was just something that I was always curious of. And as far as the exploration of this, it's an artistic look at the final hours and historical, but an artistic look at what went through his mind as he realized he was dying. What questions did he ask to God? And what conversations did he have with the women he loved most in his life, including his mom, Priscilla, and a little-known woman who's famous, Anne Margaret, who many people don't know he also was very, very close to.
Right. And Damone, let me bring you in here. Damone Seraphin, the director of The King, The Final Hours. What pulled you into this? And I mean, you're a minister as well. And we look at Elvis and we say, okay, let's be honest. He was a conflicted man. He battled every kind of fleshly temptation and desire you can imagine, from women throwing their clothes at him and everything else. And he's got all of that. But at the same time, he would cry out to God. And I mean, I've talked with people that were part of his inner circle, and they would say that they would sometimes hear him in his bedroom, crying out and praying to the Lord and things like this. And so he had that constant struggle, if you will. I guess we all have it, but he really had it to the extremes, it seems. So talk about your interest in this project, if you would.
Sure. Thank you so much again for having us on. My interest is really, it's on the other side. I'm an African-American actor, director, preacher, and my interest came to see how we would deal with the part of Elvis in terms of the thing that solidified his presence globally in the music industry. It's no secret that his foundation was built on the works and the stylings of African American performers,
right?
And that his fame was built on that. And so I was intrigued to see if that would be addressed or how that would be handled in a play that would present his life in such a way. There's not been really an offering on Broadway, off Broadway, that really dealt with Elvis, this huge phenom. We've had plays that used his life as a styling. All Shook Up was a play that did that, but there's not been a play that really dealt with Elvis the man. And then I got the play. Mark and I met, and there is the intrigue of what happens in that space between between life and death, and what happens in that space, or what are the possibilities of presented in that space. And so I think that was the thing that intrigued me more than the property itself. I have to admit, I wasn't the biggest Elvis fan because, many black people looked at him with the side eye.
Right, because, he stole from Little Richard. He stole, let's face it, early on in the 50s, most of the stations that were playing him, people assumed it was a black guy, and little did they know that, a white guy that could sing like a black guy was basically lightning in a bottle, and that's what Elvis was early on.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of and we hit it ever so lightly in our production with DJ actually says that to him. They don't know if you're black. They don't know what you are. The assumption is that you are because of the way you sound, but that you were right that people didn't really know who this guy was.
But you know what, though? One thing I got to say, though, is that Elvis, he made it a point he never disassociated himself with black gospel roots. He never disassociated himself with that. I mean, like the sweet inspiration. I'll tell you a side anecdote. You may not even know this, Damone, but I'll share it with you real quick. Elvis, one time in the 70s, this is toward his later years, when he was playing the Houston Astrodome, and this was in the early 1970s. And apparently he was instructed, because it was down there in Texas, he was instructed to leave the Sweet Inspirations at home, which were the three black women. One of them was Whitney Houston's mom, as a matter of fact. And they said, don't bring them there. And so Elvis said, I will not do the concert if I can't have the Sweet Inspirations with me. Yeah, absolutely. And so not only did he have the Sweet Inspirations there, but when the concert started, Elvis rode around the perimeter of the Houston Astrodome in a convertible car, sitting with the Sweet Inspirations, as they could basically a thumb in the nose to anybody who didn't like these black women being part of his band. So I mean, absolutely. I got to give him a lot of credit, because he did stuff like that. And in the early 70s, that was a controversial thing to do in the South.
No, that's huge. It's huge. I think it's interesting. And then we can, circle back to how our play deals with it. But I think, we can't escape the difficulty of that period in which he lived, and then how he was forced to present himself in light of the tensions between the races. And so I absolutely knew that story. Sissy would tell that story a lot, actually.
Sure.
And so it's
Sure.
heartbreaking, it's devastating. But there's a deep conundrum there too, in terms of how we walk out our faith in light of such behaviors and sociological constructs that are antithetical to that of our faith. So
Right.
I think that was the draw. And then, there is the romantic and the struggle of romance between artists, both of strong temperaments. That is the relationship between he and Anne Margaret, and then the attraction between innocence and not. He's not an innocent person.
Well,
right?
let's face it. I mean, he in many ways was if I can use a double-minded man. He battled between the world and the word many times, and it was a struggle. It doesn't justify it at all. But anyway, gentlemen, hang on just a second. Short break, and we'll pick it up from there and spend our last few minutes together next. More with Mark Macias, who is the playwright and the producer of The King, The Final Hours, and Damone Seraphin, the director of this as well. And it's coming out October 17th through 28th there in New York, and more in a couple of minutes here on The Bob Duco Show.
Retirement is the one time you decide where and how you withdraw income. But be careful how you do this. With the new 2018 tax law, you could pay more in taxes than you really have to, because you will be forced by the IRS to take required minimum distributions at age 70 and a half. Here at Kelly Capital Partners, we can help you set up a retirement income strategy that is tax efficient. With our proactive view of retirement planning, Kelly Capital Partners can help you keep more of your money where you want it, working for you and toward your retirement goals. You have to pay your taxes, but you certainly don't have to overpay your taxes. My team here at Kelly Capital Partners and I want to help make sure you don't overpay. I'm Janie Kelly of Kelly Capital Partners, and here at Kelly Capital Partners, we want to help you retire well.
To arrange a complimentary review, call Kelly Capital Partners at 248-621-3000 or go to wmuz.com/Kelly Capital. Neither the firm nor its agents or representatives may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchase decisions.
Folks, part of retiring well, remember, is making sure you're not spending money where you don't need to. Okay? And that's why you need to talk with Kelly Capital Partners today. They are the experts when it comes to your retirement, your finances, all of that. Call now at 248-621-3000.
Exposing the lies with hard truth. The Bob Duco Show on WMUZ 103.5 The Light. Detroit made, Bible strong.
I want to talk with you folks about something really serious right now. Your will. I know a lot of you have been putting off getting a will, right? Just like I did for way too long. Well, not anymore. Ed Gudeman has done the will and trust for me and my wife, and I got to tell you, I'm so glad it's done, and it's done right. Now, here's some things I used to believe about wills and trusts, but now I know better. First of all, I used to believe that wills and trusts are just for rich people. Well, that's not true. Everybody needs a will, or your kids are going to end up in probate. You don't want a judge making these decisions. Don't put your kids through that. Number two, that those cheap online do-it-yourself programs for wills online, that they're just as good. Well, I did some research and I found out they're not. They don't hold up in court, and your kids end up in probate anyway. Let's face it, folks, in life, you get what you pay for. And the truth is, a will and trust needs to be done legally right with an experienced attorney who knows what he's doing. And that's why I went to Ed Gudeman at Wills and Trusts Now. Ed's been doing this for decades, folks. He knows his stuff. And I know my family's taken care of. That's right. The will and trust is done. I don't have to think about it anymore. And you know what the best part is? A professional, legally sound will and trust from an experienced attorney typically costs anywhere from $3,500 to $4,500. Again, you get what you pay for. But right now, Ed Gudeman is willing to do a full, legal, and complete will and trust for my listeners, not for $3,500 or $4,500, but for only $1,600. And that's for a couple, for both of you combined, $1,600. Folks, you cannot beat this. Now, Ed's not going to be able to offer this deal forever, so seriously, you need to give him a call and get this done now, once and for all. So call 248-546-2800. Make sure you mention my name, okay? That way you get the $1,600 price. 248-546-2800 for Ed Gudeman and Wills and Trusts now. That's 248-546-2800. Call today. Here's one of my favorite songs. Thank you. Sounds just like me in the shower. All right, spending the last few minutes with Mark Macias and Damone Seraphin. Pretty much nothing like.
That's actually one of my favorite recordings there.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? That was the one from Aloha from Hawaii. And that was, you think about that, that concert was seen by over 1 billion people worldwide. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, 1 billion people worldwide watching that concert. They had to be thinking to themselves, oh man, hope I hit this note. I hope I hit this note.
It's one of the key moments, another key moment that we deal with in our show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite powerful.
Well, let me ask you about that. I mean, your Broadway play, of course, The King, The Final Hours in New York, October 17th through the 28th, and it is The Final Hours. Let's talk about that last day, Mark, a little bit. August 16th, 1977. There are a lot of different accounts of what happened. As I mentioned before, we had Rick Stanley on the show a few years back, who is now a Baptist pastor, and Rick Stanley says that the day before Elvis died, that Rick Stanley was, Elvis was talking to him about Jesus Christ, telling him that he needs to accept Jesus Christ as his Savior. He said that there were times that he was telling me some amazing stories, that there were times where Elvis would call him up into the bedroom and say, and call a bunch of people together and say, I just want to get together and everybody just pray, and things like that. That there was a time in a concert when some people were holding up a big sign, this is toward the end in his later years, holding up a big sign that said, Elvis is the King. And then in the middle of the concert, he said, you know what, take that sign down, Jesus Christ is really the King. So little stuff like that. But at the same time, here's a guy who's got all the women and he's shooting out TVs, and it's like, so all this conflict. But then you get to the end there, and there's no doubt he pretty much self-destructed in one way or another. What do we know about those last few hours before he finally died?
Yeah, everything that you're saying about his brother, I have heard that and read that as well. I've also heard and read that on his final night that he went to his piano and played gospel songs alone on the piano. He tried to get others to wake up, and he was in very much pain at 2 a.m. in the morning, sent his stepbrother out to the pharmacist to pick up some more pain pills because he was in such pain, called his doctor and said, I need these now. And he was up all night, went into his bedroom, couldn't sleep, and finally he went to the piano and played. And, I think that, all great artists are, moved by the Spirit. They understand, a deeper sense of themselves, and I think that's one of the things that made Elvis great. Perhaps he did know, and no one knows this at this point. It's an artistic perspective, like what went through Elvis Presley's mind during his final hours. No one knows his mind, but the things like you just said about Rick, or how he played the piano, on that final night, I think kind of shows that he knew that his time was coming to an end, and he just wanted to make it right with God. That would be my my belief just based on all the things that I've read about him.
How do you guys, and Damone, let me go over to you in our last couple of minutes here. How do you play this out on the stage? I mean, for people that see the production, how is it played out? Is it pretty much set? Is it set in the last 24 hours with some flashback scenes, or how do you pretty much set it?
Well, without giving away all of the
sure,
goodies,
yeah, and tell us everything, so there's no incentive for anybody to go, would you?
No incentive to everything. No, but I can say that we take our audiences on a trip that spans a really good portion of Elvis's life, and so we get to travel from his first time walking into Sun Records all the way up to that last moment before he leaves us. So the audience will really get to get a closer look in a way that we've not been able to before. To learn these things about Elvis and the possibilities of what those final hours were like for him.
Right. Well, like I say, folks, it's coming out in October 17th through 28th at the Producers Club Theater in New York. If you want to see this Broadway play, you go online to thefinalhours.com. And Mark Macias and Damone Serafin. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. Take care now. You're listening to The Bob Dutko Show. Bob Dutko Show. Bob Dutko Show.